Okay. I'm sorry, Trey. Did you give me the signal? I was busy. We're good to go? Good morning, everyone. We're in the last story in the book of Judges. There's some indications that this actually took place before the book of Judges, or before we had judges appointed. And this story is it's about a corporate sin that leads to a civil war. And it begins with a concubine and her husband, and this leads into a civil war. A great atrocity had happened in this story, a terrible atrocity. They even mention that nothing like this has ever happened in the nation of Israel. We're in Judges chapter 19. And the heading of this is a Levite and his concubine. And a concubine, it's kind of like between a wife and a slave or a servant. It begins by her leaving her husband and taking off. And after about 4 months, he goes to look for her. And I know that's kind of unusual to me for a concubine to decide to leave her husband. We'll see as the story goes on. We'll see that he really didn't have much of a heart. It begins by, in those days, Israel had no king, and we've heard this before. And at the very end of the book of Judges, it says everyone did what was right in their own sight. That's always a lot of trouble when you do what's right in your own sight and you don't look for the Lord's way. Don't take time to pray and study. I'm going to start reading chapter 19, verse 1 and following, verse 1 through 4. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judea, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judea. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her father's house. Pardon me. And when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, prevailed upon him to stay. So he remained with them 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. So he goes to look for her, and he's welcomed by her father. Continue with verse 5. On the 4th day, they got up early and prepared to leave. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat. Then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down and ate and drank together. Afterward, the girl's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, the father-in-law persuaded him. So he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the girl's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait until afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. And the place where they end up going is about 10 miles away. So on donkey, you want to start early in the day. So if it's later in the day, you might as well spend the night there. I think the father-in-law is wanting to keep them there a little longer too, maybe. And verse 9. Then when the man, I'm sorry, I got something in my throat. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself." In the original language, when it says spend the night here. The original language shows how close they were to when they were wandering nomads. It actually says it's time to pitch a tent. They didn't pitch a tent. That's just a figure of speech. I worked with a guy that when it was time for lunch, for his lunch break, he said it's time to go eat a bean. Did he mean he's going to really go eat a bean? No, he was going to go home, but he kind of remembers the times when he was a lot poorer, and they probably ate some beans. Anybody know of any other sayings like this? I couldn't think of any. Early tomorrow morning, you can get up and be on your way home. But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his two saddled donkeys and his concubine. With the two saddled donkeys and his concubine. At this time, Jerusalem had not been conquered by the Israelites. It was still in pagan territory. When they were near Jebus, verse 11, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into an alien city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." So the master did not want to stay in what's now called Jerusalem, because at that time it was a pagan city, and they didn't think they'd be treated very well there. Okay, verse 13. He added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set, and as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin, there they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat at the city square, but no one took them in his home for the night. It was kind of a common practice if you're a traveler. You'd go to the city square and hoping someone would come by and pick you up and take you home. And it didn't happen right away until that evening. And they were in the tribe of Benjamin, thinking that would be a safe place, but it turned out not to be so safe. Verse 16. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the men of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way to Bethlehem in Judah, to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim. Where I live, I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me into his house. We have both straw and fodder for the donkeys." And I'm going to go on down to verse 20. "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square." The old man knew how dangerous that would be to spend the night there. So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the men who came to your house so that we can have sex with them." This right away shows some of the evil people that were in that town. And what other story do we have similar to this that kind of starts out this way? Do you recall something in the book of Genesis? Sodom and Gomorrah? Yeah. So kind of starts out this way. Yeah. The owner of, verse 23, the owner of the house went inside and said to them, "No, my friends, do not be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this disgraceful thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will give them to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But to this man, don't do such a disgraceful thing. You know, we see over and over again examples of the people not having high regard for girls or women. You know, and we can be so thankful that in the time that we live and where we live that everyone is treated. Everyone should be treated with respect. That's the direction we try to go. That everyone should be treated with respect, but it was not so back then. In verse 25, but the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn they let her go. At daybreak the women went back. At daybreak the woman, this concubine, went back to the house where her master was staying. She fell down at the door and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. Okay, so he takes her body and puts it on the donkey, and let's look what he does next, starting with verse 29. When they reached home, he took a knife and cut up the concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them onto all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a thing has never been done or been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Think about it, consider it, tell us what to do." So first, when he seen her body at the threshold, he tells her to get up, and then he realizes she's dead. And showing not much regard for her, then treating her body in a disrespectful way, cutting it up and sending it to all the tribes to give them a message. It's kind of like, I don't know if you remember, Saul cut up a cow and sent it to all the nations of Israel. And that was not nearly as heinous as this, as cutting up her body. But he was trying to get everybody riled up. I want to look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 through 5. And this tells us how if we have a brother caught in sin, this tells us how we should deal with him. You know, the Israelites, there were some men from the tribe of Benjamin that were caught in a sin, and the rest of Israel tried to get the tribe of Benjamin, to hand this person over. So there's a right way and a wrong way to treat someone who's caught in sin. And let's look and see if the Israelites treated their brother Benjamin this way, or they did some right things. They confronted sin, but I think they did some wrong things. They went about it in an arrogant way. Let's look at chapter 6, verse 1. Brother, if someone is caught in sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So this is for those who are spiritual. There's a general admonition we can give to each other. Paul says that in another passage that anyone can do this, but this is for someone who's really caught in sin. Who is this for? In the verse. For you who are spiritual. So this is someone who's really spiritual, has the right heart, and has a good amount of wisdom. It says to restore him gently. It says to watch yourselves. What two things can happen if you don't watch yourself? What's that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, if we don't watch ourselves, we could fall in the same sin that they do. We could fall away from God. That's one thing. Another thing, arrogance could come in. If we're not careful, we could think we're better than they are. And there's so much that we could point to say that we're not a whole lot better than them. And the only reason that we are better is because Christ has made a difference in our lives. So we have to watch our attitude as we confront our brother or sister in sin. Okay, we're into chapter 20. Then all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba, in verse 1, from Dan to Beersheba to the land of Gilead, came out as one man and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their place in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 soldiers armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gilead in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and you know the rest of that story. In verse 8, all the people rose as one man, saying, "None of us will go home. Not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we'll do in Gibeah. We'll go up against it as the lot directs. We will take 10 men out of every 100 from the tribes of Israel, and 100 from every 1,000, 1,000 from every 10,000, to get provisions for the army. Then when the army arrives at Gibeah in Benjamin, it can give them what they deserve for all the vileness done in Israel." So the men of Israel got together and united as one man against the city. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What about this awful crime that has committed among you? Now surrender those wicked men of Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." So they sent provisions ahead of time for their armies, and then they went to Gibeah, and then they sent word to all the tribes to put these men forward so that they can put them to death. And I'm thinking at this point they probably let their pride take over, and they felt confidence that they could defeat the tribe of Benjamin. They had so many more soldiers. But there's a problem with overconfidence. The Lord doesn't like it too much unless we're confident in Him. And quite often, if we appear too confident, we can turn people away. Okay, it says, "But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 chosen men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 chosen men who were left-handed, and of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss." So the Benjamites were known to be left-handed, and these select 700 could hit a hair without missing it. So that they had the special skill. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fighting men. So 400,000 against, 26,700? You would think that the Israelites, outside of Benjamin, you think the Israelites could easily defeat Benjamin. But another problem with overconfidence and confronting someone with sin is that you can underestimate them, and you will not feel the risk involved. There's a personal risk involved when you confront someone with their sin, and we should feel that personal risk. What kind of risk should we be looking for when we confront someone with sin? First of all, we may turn them off by not coming at them, showing our care and concern for them. And second of all, this has happened to me before. They may come back at you with something that you're guilty of. When my kids were little, this one stands out most in my mind. When my kids were little, I'd tell them to pick up their toys, and they'd come back and say, "Well, Dad, you left your shoes out, and you left this or that out." They pointed out the things I had done wrong, and so I pick them up, and then they had a better attitude about picking their stuff up. So you think, as much as Israel outnumbered the tribe of Benjamin, you would think that they would easily defeat them. And verse 18 in Judges chapter 20. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They said, "Who of us shall go first to fight against the Benjamites?" The Lord replied, "Judah shall go first." The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched camp near Gibeah. The men of Israel went out to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them in Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield. But the men of Israel encouraged one another and again took up positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord. They said, "Shall we go up against the battle against the Benjamites, our brothers?" Notice how they start out real confident. Now they, for no logical reason, the Benjamites defeated them. But then they still felt the need to confront the Benjamites because of their sin, even though perhaps they didn't go about it the right way in my mind. And in verse 24, then the Israelites drew near to Benjamin the second day. This time, when the Benjamites came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. So again, they lost another battle against the Benjamites. And I believe the Lord is trying to teach them a lesson to how you should deal with your brother. And in the end, they do restore the Benjamites, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Then the Israelites, all the people went up to Bethel, and there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant of God was there with Phinehas and Eleazar, sons of Aaron, ministering before it. They asked, "Shall we go up again to battle with Benjamin, our brother, or not?" The Lord responded, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." So finally, this is the third time that they inquired of the Lord. This time the Lord actually says, "I'll give them into your hands." After they wept and offered sacrifices. But I don't know, can you see the change of their heart from the beginning of the battle until now? Can you see the change of their heart? They went out real confident before, and now they're broken down, and they wept and cried and offered sacrifices to the Lord. And at this time they felt the real risk of going up against the Benjamites. Okay, starting with verse 29. Then Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Gibeah as they had done before. The Benjamites came out to meet them and were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that about 30 men fell in the open field and on the roads, the one leading to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. While the Benjamites were saying, "We are defeating them," as before, the Israelites were saying, "Let's retreat and draw them away from the city to the roads." Now the Benjamites are becoming more confident, and they see that they believe that they're winning. But starting with verse 33. All the men of Israel moved from their places and took up position in Baal Tamar, and the Israelite ambush charged out of its place on the west of Gibeah. Then 10,000 of Israelites' finest men made a frontal attack on Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And on that day, the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with the sword. Then the Benjamites saw that they were beaten. Now the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin because they relied on the ambush they set near Gibeah. The men who had been in ambush made a sudden dash to Gibeah, spreading out the whole of the city to the sword. The men of Israel had arranged with the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and then the men of Israel would turn and battle. So they made it look like a city was burning down for the sake of the Benjamites. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on the men of Israel, about 30, and they said, "We are defeating them as in the first battle." But when the column of smoke began to rise from the city, the Benjamites turned and saw the smoke of the whole city going up into the sky. Then the men of Israel turned on them, and the men of Benjamin were terrified because they realized that disaster had come upon them. So they fled before the Israelites in the direction of the desert, but they could not escape the battle. And the men of Israel who came out of the towns cut them down there. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily overran them in the vicinity of Gibeah on the east. 18,000 Benjamites fell, at all of them valiant fighters. As they turned and fled towards the desert to the rock of Rimmah, the Israelites cut down 5,000 men along the roads. They kept pressing after the Benjamites as far as Gibeah and struck down 2,000 more. On that day, 25,000 Benjamites, swordsmen, fell, all of them valiant fighters. But 600 men turned and fled into the desert in the rock of Rimmah, where they stayed 4 months. So there was, in all these battles, the only thing that was left was 600 men from Benjamin. They had no wives, and so the tribe of Benjamin could have been cut off at this time because the Israelites swore a vow that they would not let any of their daughters marry the Benjamites.
Why do you suppose the Benjamites were trying to protect the city of Gibeah
You know, yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. And sometimes families can be like that. They can protect their own even when they're in the wrong. I don't have a real good answer for that. It's a big question in my mind. It was Benjamin was nearly cut down because they were trying to protect a few of their own. I don't know, anybody have any other comments on this? The men of Israel, verse 48, the men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all the towns to the sword, including animals and everything else. They found all the towns they came across, they set the fire. So just 600 Benjamite men. And after this, Israel regretted what they did. If you confront someone and it doesn't go well because of the risk involved, you can have the same feeling that they're going to have, that they regretted that they went to war and they cut down the Benjamites, and they probably went a little farther than they needed to. And they started with the wrong, in my opinion, they started with the wrong type of attitude to begin with. And we're in chapter 21. They decide, they regret what they did, and the problem is, how do they provide wives for the Benjamites without breaking their vow? And they found a clever way here. May not always seem right, but that's the times they lived in. The men of Israel, we're in chapter 21. The men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah. Not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. The people went to Bethel, where they sat before God until evening, raising their voices and weeping bitterly. O Lord, the God of Israel, they cried, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? Early the next day, the people built an altar and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Israelites asked, who from the tribe of Israel has failed to assemble before the Lord? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah should certainly be put to death. So if there's any tribes that didn't show up to this meeting they had, they were to be put to death. And the ones that were there made a solemn vow not to allow their daughters to marry the Benjamites. And they kept their vows. They kept their vows pretty solidly. I mean, we have in the New Testament, Jesus warns them, if you make a vow, you better keep it. Well, it says not to even either say yes or no, but the thing we can get out of that is we should, yes or no could be considered a vow, and we should keep those when we answer yes or no to the Lord. And verse 6, now the Israelites grieved for their brother, the Benjamites. Today one tribe is cut off from Israel, they said. How can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? Then they asked, which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah? They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp for the assembly. For when they counted the people, they found that none of the people of Jabesh Gilead were there. So the assembly set 12,000 fighting men with an instruction to go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including the women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Kill every male and every woman who is not a virgin. They found among the people living in Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. So they found out that this one tribe, that the people of this Jabesh Gilead did not attend the meeting. So according to what they had decided ahead of time, they should be put to death. but then they said, spare the virgins, kill everyone else. So it provided 400 women for the tribe of Benjamin, but there's still a shortfall of 200 women. So they come up with another idea to take care of that. Starting with verse 13. Then the whole assembly sent an offer of peace to the Benjamites at the rock of Rimmon. So the Benjamites returned at that time and were given the women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared, but there were not enough for all of them. The people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. And the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs, they said, so that the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We can give them our daughters as wives. Oh, we can't give them our daughters as wives since the Israelites have taken an oath. Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to a Benjamite. So they solved part of their problem by providing virgins from a group of people that did not make the vow, so that they could do that in their mind. And then still have 200 Benjamites without wives. So they came up with another idea how to fulfill those 200. But look, there is the annual festival of the Lord at Shiloh, to the north of Bethel and east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and to the south of Lebonah. So they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and hide in the vineyards and watch when the girls of Shiloh come out to join in the dancing. Then rush from the vineyards, and each of you seize a wife from the girls of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin. I know this is probably a joke in bad taste, but this festival it became known as a place to pick up girls. Sorry about that. They literally picked them up and carried them off. Verse 22. Their fathers or brothers complain to us. If their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, do us a kindness by helping them, because we did not get wives for them during the war, and you are innocent, since you did not give your daughter to them. And I know we live in different times, but I'm thinking if someone picks up my daughter and carries them away, I'm going to go to the police and say they kidnapped my wife. Can you help me get them? But they're saying, don't worry, because you did not make a vow to give your daughters to them in marriage, but they were taken by force, so it's not a problem. You know? Doesn't that seem weird in our times?
Well, the people had quit following God a long time before. And if they were following the law as they should have, none of this would ever have happened.
Yeah.
None of it would.
Yeah.
And so they had completely quit following God. And that's why we need Jesus.
Yeah, we need Jesus. We sure do. You know, the Great Commission that Jesus told us to go out to all the world, and I believe that means we should have influence on our governments too, and the governments of the world. And they had lost their influence a long time ago, their godly influence.
I think we need to be careful that it doesn't happen to the church too.
Yeah.
I mean, who are we? We're no different from anybody else. And they quit following God, and these kinds of things happen to them. What happens to us when we quit following God? We can say we're Christians.
Yeah.
They said they were Israelites.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a certain power that God gives us by turning to Him and following Him. And you know, He provides good direction for us. Not that everything's going to be easy, but we're better able to handle things, and we get the right direction in life by the teachings from his book. And there are just so many advantages we have. If we pull away from God, then he, in the book of Romans in the beginning, he said that he left them over to reprobate minds. God can't leave us, just like he left Saul. In verse 23, so that it is what the Benjamites did. When the girls were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and settled in them. I just think it's so much different how we pick wives or husbands. Here they didn't even know anything about the girls, and the girls didn't know anything about their future husbands to be. In verse 24, at that time the Israelites left that place and went home to their tribes and clans, each to his own inheritance. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did a seesaw fit. It won't turn out too well if we rely on ourselves, and we need God's help, his instructions, his teachings, his influence in our lives. And that's what's so great about being the member of a congregation that believes in the Scripture and follows it, that we can be sure that we have good tools to help us in our daily life. Anybody have any comments or questions? Maybe an answer to something? Okay.
I'm so glad we don't live in that time whenever my daughters and my granddaughter or whatever would be
Yeah.
carried off without even having a
Yeah.
married.
Yeah. Yeah. That is terrible. And they say that is going from Christianity to apostasy is, they say it's just one generation away. We need to train our children. I've even heard that the mothers are the most powerful people in the world because they're the ones that have a big hand in raising the children. So I'm going to cut off with a short prayer. Father, we give thanks for this morning, and I'm so thankful for this class and that you bless each one here. Be with us not only as we study in Bible classes, but as we come together in the worship service to hear another lesson from the Scripture, and that we pray that our hearts will be open and receptive and know how to apply what we read in a way that's godly and a way that's pleasing to you. And just so thankful for our time of corporate worship and fellowship, and as we just continue to learn and to grow, and that we'll be a good influence to the neighborhood and the region where we're living. And Father, just want to say thank you for the time we can praise you through song and prayer and Bible study. And Father, just as we remember that we will come together to worship Jesus through the Lord's Supper, and thank you for Jesus and for what he means to us and the example he gave us. In his name, amen.